Hi, and welcome back to the C3 Preparedness Channel, where we prepare for Tuesday, not just doomsday. So in today's video, I put together a battery backup system for my sump pump. So whenever we're gone and we lose power, which usually there's a storm, our grid here is pretty reliable, but the chances of losing power during a heavy downpour is quite high. And when we're gone, our sump pump will now run, even though we're not here. So we purchased this house about 7 years ago. And 2 years prior to that, the previous owner had a water mitigation system installed after coming down to the basement and getting some wet socks. So what they did was they removed 12 inches of concrete around the entire perimeter, the inside of the building, put in a drain tile, drilled holes in the bottom block of the foundation to relieve that hydrostatic pressure, to let it come in, hit the sump basin, the drain tile, all the way back to the sump basin. And let me tell you, when it pours outside, when we're getting a ton of rain, that sump pump is running just constantly. We've got a check valve on it, but there's a lot of water coming in there. And so after realizing this, I saw how fragile this is. And so we purchased a Harbor Freight generator, so that way we had a means to be able to power this when we didn't have power. Now, problem is you got to be home to use it. And we didn't have the kind of money to put a whole house standby generator in. Now, I want to put one in, but that also means I got to upgrade my panel. Some of the code changes that came with since then, we got to just add more stuff, which is fine. But it's an expense. And now this isn't free from expense either. It was a little more than I wanted to spend, but given the cost of my deductible, this is some cheap insurance. So I've got some affiliate links to the parts below that I purchased in here. So I've got the inverter charger, I got a battery. Now it's not the same battery because this battery I purchased about 3 years ago for the solar installation that I never did. I'm still gonna do, but this is something. And I just, like my outro, I always say, it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be done. And it's done, which is awesome. It's not what I wanted. Like I said, I wanted to have a solar, and I could complicate this by adding solar in the mix as well, but that might be something later. So I also have the Renogy battery shunt, which you'll see in some pictures coming up. That just monitors how long till it's full or how long till it's discharged, and it's a great tool to have. So into this, I have about $1,100. Now the battery alone was $700. Now when I purchased the battery, they were a little more expensive than they are today. So you can buy a lot of battery for your buck now than you could even 3 years ago. And so I don't know that I would purchase the same one today, because in some instances you can almost get double the capacity for the same amount of money. The inverter charger that I purchased was an Amazon special OLTE ANP, something, a 2000 watt inverter, and it said it was 4 sump pumps. But the great thing is, the way I wired it, I can also plug in my freezer in case it's an extended outage, and I should be able to get that running. And also on top of it, I can run my generator if I'm home, feed that inverter charger, and it looks like, and you'll see in the pictures again coming up, I think it was like 4 hours to fully charge, maybe 5 hours. And that generator that I purchased really sips the gas. And so, like I said, battery 700, inverter charger was 300. The shunt was 75 bucks. And I actually got that on sale, and so I pulled the trigger on it. It's normally 80 something. And then the plywood, the shelf, and the fasteners was about another 50 bucks. So I said, if I hadn't said it earlier, that $1,100 compared to my deductible is some pretty cheap insurance, because just my flooring alone in my basement exceeds the cost of my install. And if something happens and the sump pump fails, I mean, failures happen. Even though I've got the system in, the sump pump is good. It also has an auxiliary alarm on the sump pump. So if it starts to rise, there's a float switch that'll make and just make a high-pitched screaming noise. I try to test it every time I think about it. There's just a little 9-volt battery in there that makes and sets off that alarm. And so Let's get into the pictures here. So as you'll see, here's where I installed the plywood. I installed it with some 2.5-inch screws into some framing members into the basement there. Now I bought the shelf from my local hardware store, just a cheap pre-finished MDF thing with a couple hangers. I used some 1-inch screws to go from the brackets to the plywood there. Now here I got the battery on it, got it tested out. I would have filmed this entire thing, but it would have been pretty weird because I had to try to figure out the best way to orient it. I had a plan, but that all went out the window when I when I realized, like here, my wires, you know, this was the only way I could make it happen. I didn't want to go and get new terminals. I didn't want to cut the wire to do whatever because this might not be the permanent installation. This is just how I'm installing it today. And this very well could be like this for the next 5 years. So here you see I threw on some more cables. And here I ran some conduit. And what you'll see is I've got a box in between the battery and the inverter charger. That's going to be grid power all the time. Now, down to this conduit here, you'll see there's 2 boxes. I got a box on the right and a box on the left. So the box with the single receptacle, the single duplex, that's my backup power. That cord you see plugged into the receptacle in the left box, that's my freezer. So if we're leaving for a trip, I can just unplug it from the grid power, plug it into the backup power, because that has 120 volts. That has grid power running through it, but it's being passed through, and I don't think it needs to, I don't know, I'm a little worried about running the freezer on it all the time. Let me know in the comments below if you think that's irrational, because it is the same voltage as the grid voltage. It's just passing through on the transfer switch, the automatic transfer switch. So it knows that, hey, we've got power here, it's coming through. But it's going to run constantly, and it's going to run a whole lot more than my sump pump. So on that box on the right, I drilled through the back of that and set a cut-in receptacle on the other side for my sump pump. So that is plugged into it all the time. I put my kilowatt in there just to see how often it cycles, because when I'd like to know how much it actually does run, rather than just watching the basin outside fill up with water and come to daylight. So here I've actually got it powered up now. Now when I do the neutral or the negative first and then the positive, sounds like this inverter charger's got some pretty large capacitors in it, and there was quite the spark. I almost need a new pair of shorts after that. So here you can see I have the displays powered up, and the one on the left, that comes with the inverter charger, and that tells you just what the status of the inverter charger is doing. You can just turn it on and off, turn the display, the backlight on and off. It tells you if it's charging, if it's AC out or DC out. Now the one on the right, that's the Renogy, or Renogy, however it is, battery shunt monitoring system that I have the affiliate link. This is pretty cool. It's got 8 levels of brightness, and it has a feature, I think if you hold the down button, it'll zero out the battery. So that way it tells you, as it's charging, it'll figure out the capacity and how long it takes to do that. So there you have it. That was my install. That was my weekend project over Easter here. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions about the install, feel free to leave a comment below. Now, if I didn't say it already, my installation is not perfect. Just like my my outro, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be done. So just start somewhere.